Ok, xin chào mọi người. Mình xin tự giới thiệu, mình tên là Lâm. Và hiện tại mình đang làm việc trong lĩnh vực về công nghệ thông tin, chuyên về những cái mảng như là về ứng dụng nè, website nè và game. Đặc biệt về game thì bọn mình đang có những cái sản phẩm trên nền tảng di động và cả trên máy tính. Thì tất nhiên ngoài công việc thì mình cũng có dành thời gian để dịch chuyển này, để nhìn ngắm những cái thế giới xung quanh mình, và mình nhận ra rằng có rất là nhiều những người bạn, những người anh, những người chị, chú bác, tất cả mọi người, và những cái con người này rất là giỏi. Mình may mắn được biết thêm cũng như là được học hỏi thêm từ những con người này, và những cái điều mà mình học được từ họ đã tạo cho mình cái cảm hứng để làm cái số podcast đầu tiên. Tất nhiên là mình cũng không phải là một người đủ chuyên môn cũng như là một người quá giỏi để có thể thực hiện những cái podcast với chất lượng vượt trội và tạo ra được một cái lượng traffic lớn. Tuy nhiên hy vọng với những cái podcast mà mình tạo ra ở đây có thể giúp ích nhiều cho cộng đồng, cho thậm chí cho ngành nghề mà mình đang làm, hay đơn thuần chỉ là tạo ra một cái niềm vui và sự kết nối với mọi người xung quanh thôi. Đó là lý do vì sao mà podcast mà mình đang làm đây nó không phải là một cái podcast tập trung về mặt lợi nhuận hay là có doanh thu. Tất nhiên là trong tương lai nếu mà nó có thể có một nguồn lợi nhuận tốt, có một cái doanh thu tốt thì điều đó quá tuyệt vời. Tuy nhiên thì cái mục tiêu ban đầu của bọn mình nó sẽ là tập trung tạo ra những cái yếu tố như là kết nối con người với nhau. Và vì đây cũng là một cái số đầu tiên cho nên là mình hy vọng có thể nhận thêm được nhiều feedback cũng như là nhiều nhận xét của tất cả mọi người để có thể cải thiện và tiến bộ hơn nữa trong tương lai. Như đã chia sẻ ở trên thì hiện tại mình đang làm việc trong lĩnh vực về công nghệ thông tin. Do vậy sẽ hợp lý hơn nếu mà người khách mời đầu tiên của mình cũng là một người có cái kinh nghiệm trong cái lĩnh vực này. Và không chỉ là một người có kinh nghiệm trong lĩnh vực về công nghệ thông tin trên dưới 10 năm, thì anh cũng là một người đã dành rất là nhiều tình cảm cho đất nước hình chữ S, vì anh đã dành thời gian sinh sống ở đây cũng khá là lâu rồi. Và đối với anh, Việt Nam như là một quê hương thứ hai kể từ ngày đầu tiên anh đặt chân lên cái đất nước này. Và mình xin tự giới thiệu người bạn của mình và người đồng hành của mình trong chương trình số đầu tiên ngày hôm nay, đó là anh Sean Delaney. Hi Sean, first of all, I would like to say thank yous to you so much for taking your time to join to my first episode. First, Happy New Year's and also Happy Lunar New Year's to you and Molly. And hopefully both of you guys with are having a new year with the happiness, success, and you guys will achieve a lot of the wonderful things in this year. For sure, last but not least, you guys are strong enough to have more trips together, not only in Vietnam, but also in the countries around Southeast Asia.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be invited, particularly given it's
Thank
the
you.
first episode as well. So thanks, and likewise, happy Lunar New Year to you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. Actually, we already knew each other very casually. Sean just joined to one of my amateur football clubs in Saigon, which I organize, named Saigon United. We played football together for a long time, and then we have some communications about what we were doing and how the IT market in the Vietnam went on. So yes, please, Sean, help me to introduce yourself more about you, about what you achieved today, and about why you decide to go to the country, another like Vietnam. It's a very different country, right? From the England
Yeah,
to the country in Southeast Asia with different backgrounds,
mm.
and what was happening with you, like you decide why you decide to choose to become a person working in the IT and the technology industry, and yeah,
Sure.
give us a difference between the IT markets in England and Vietnam.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, I'm born in London,
Mm-hmm.
from the UK,
Mm.
and I am currently based in Da Nang. Recently moved from Saigon, and yeah. So, in terms of, I suppose my career, I've since I graduated university in 2008.
Mm.
Um, I've always worked in sales, business development,
Mm,
marketing within the tech industry in some shape or form. So
mm,
I've worked for software companies and also some multinational cloud computing
mm,
businesses. So one very big American company that I work for in London.
mm,
Um, and this is actually my second time in Vietnam. So
mm,
this time around, I arrived in June 2022. So I've been here
mm,
nearly 2 years.
mm,
But I actually spent 3.5 years here between 2012 and 2015.
mm,
Um, so that time was a little bit more random.
mm,
Um, I'd been working in the UK for the same company for about 4 years, and I wanted
mm,
to move abroad. I wanted to try living somewhere else, and
mm,
I had traveled in Southeast Asia, but I hadn't actually been to Vietnam. But one of my best friends that I went to school with had just come back from Vietnam, doing a
mm,
year working in Vietnam around about the time that I was thinking about moving away.
mm.
And he kind of sold me on Vietnam. He said, go to Vietnam, you'll love it. Great
Mm.
people, great food. And so he convinced me
Ah,
um,
okay.
one day, one day that we were hanging out in London together. So I said, sure. He put me in touch with some friends that he made. In Vietnam, and yeah, I decided to come to Vietnam for 3 to 6 months, and then I ended up loving it so much I stayed for about 3.5 years. Um, then I got a job opportunity back in London, where I
Mm,
was head of business development. No, sorry, not there. I was enterprise business development
mm,
for another data center cloud computing company.
mm,
Um, and I worked for that business for just under 7 years. And I always had in the back of my mind one day I would come back to Vietnam because
mm,
it felt like unfinished business, and I still had some very good friends here from the
mm,
first time around. Um, and then obviously everybody knew the COVID situation. Vietnam
mm,
opened its doors again to sort of inbound travel in early 2022. And around about that time, I was thinking about leaving my current company in London.
ah, okay.
My now fiance was also thinking about leaving her role,
Mm,
um, and a good friend of mine, Min,
mm,
who I knew from the first time around. We worked together at a different company. He
mm,
set up his own uh, software development company specializing in blockchain Web3 development. And he
mm.
said, "Hey, Sean, do you want to come out and manage the sales and marketing team? I need some help." So I said, "Yeah, okay." I spoke to my fiance. I said, "Should we go out to Vietnam?" And she said, "Absolutely, yeah, definitely, let's go." Um, so yeah, we spoke to a few people that I knew before. She got a job very quickly in the food and beverage industry, and yeah, and now we're here. And I've had a couple of sort of slight pivots since I've been here, but
Mm.
we're both very happy that we made the move. And yeah, I love
Yeah.
this part of the world, so it was an easy decision for me to come back.
Okay. Okay. So you already mentioned Sense, right? A company is
Yep.
located in Vietnam, which is located in Ho Chi Minh City that I know.
Yep.
So why do you have to move or change that? Do you think that is a little bit like a change quickly from a country in the Europe to a country in Asia with a different, completely different culture? Is there any specific reason to rush you about these decisions?
Um,
Just yeah, just a decision that you make very fast, like maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds without any consider or any confusion.
Yeah, I guess I mean it would kind of it was and it wasn't a quick
Mm,
decision. So as I
mm,
mentioned before, because I had spent 3 years here
mm,
before,
mm,
I already sort of I understood the culture. I already had this great love for Vietnam
mm,
and the pace of life. So as I mentioned, I kind of had in the back of my mind, if the right
mm,
opportunity came up at some point, I would make the move. And as I said, with Sense, the founder of the business, Min, he's a good friend of mine from the first time I was in Vietnam. So
mm,
I knew him already. I knew I was happy to work for someone like that.
mm.
Um, we got on, we get on really well. And so it wasn't too much of a risk, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
knew him, I knew Vietnam.
Mm,
Um, So I guess the first time I came, it was a little bit more of an unknown quantity, but I guess I knew what
Mm,
I was getting myself into. But yeah, two very different cultures. But
yeah.
the way I always look at things, I don't really see cultures as good or bad.
Mm,
They're just different, right? And there are
mm,
good points and bad points of every culture around the world.
mm,
Um, and so you can look for the differences, or you can look for the things that you enjoy. You know, there's lots of great things about the Vietnamese culture that I love from a day-to-day
mm.
perspective, from a business perspective. You know, and there are some things that still seem strange to me,
Yeah.
but that's part. You know, for me, that's part of the joy of living abroad.
Mm,
I don't want to move abroad to somewhere
mm,
that's just like the UK. You know, that's why
mm.
I've never really been interested in living in Australia or America
Yeah.
or you
They have
know.
a yeah, they have something like the same with the UK, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, those are great places. My brother lives in Australia. It's a
Yeah.
lovely part of the world, but I've always been drawn to places that are very different because, you
Yeah.
know, like it's a complete new experience. You
Mm.
see things very differently. And me as a person, I've grown more in my 2 years in Vietnam and 3 years the first time than I did in, you know, 20, 30 years in London.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, cool, cool. So yeah, cool. Glad to hear that it seems like everybody is behind you and they support your decision, right? I know
Yeah.
that, as you know, as we know, there's a lot of the Western people who are really enjoying the living life here in Vietnam. They have a
Mm,
good job, they have a good relationship. But I believe that on the first day, everybody has difficulties and have the same thing.
mm.
Feel unfamiliar with the new country, you know. Do you and
Mm.
your fiancés have the similar problems? And how did you guys to overcome that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there are big differences. I guess it's kind of a mindset thing. So I think,
Hmm.
you know, we were both prepared before we came out here that things
Hmm.
would be very different.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's the thing. You know, when you make a big change, you've got to be. I suppose the way of saying it is, if you're comfortable being
Hmm.
uncomfortable, that's a good trait to have because
Hmm.
generally speaking, whenever we are growing as a person, professionally or personally, whatever, we go
Hmm.
through an element of discomfort, and that discomfort, if you can stick it out, normally leads to real growth and enjoyment and stuff. So I
Hmm.
think just both myself and Molly, my fiance, are, you know, we're quite I suppose adventurous people. We're
Hmm.
willing to take risks, and I think that's important, you know, if you are somebody that wants to try and live somewhere completely different. And you know, for me, part of the, as I mentioned, part of the joy is Vietnam is so different. You know, I
Hmm.
don't want it to be the same. You know, I want to learn about how the Vietnamese do things, and
Yeah.
whether it's business, whether it's in, you know, day-to-day life. um and it is very different, but you know, to be honest, it wasn't too difficult because I find the Vietnamese people are so friendly and so
Hmm.
welcoming. The weather's lovely. You know, it's a very sociable way of
Hmm.
life here, like, which is quite different from the UK. So, you know, you walk out in your street and, you know, you can go and sit down and have a coffee around the corner, you know, with people that live in the area, and people talk to you and smile at you. And
Hmm.
so from that point of view, it's very easy to come here not knowing many
Hmm.
people. And that probably can't be true of a lot of places in the world.
Hmm.
And I think that was probably certainly the first I came to Vietnam, when I didn't know what it would be like.
Hmm.
That made it really easy.
Hmm.
Everybody was so friendly and so welcoming. It's quite easy to settle in quickly. Um, so yeah, I think very different, but I think it's easy to settle from my point of view anyway.
Yeah, sure. Congratulations. It's not easy, but I think you guys have been together for this year. I firmly believe that it could be become even stronger, and who know, you will continue your journey in Vietnam for much longer than, right?
I hope so.
And
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So yeah, some like personal questions or some discussion
Mhm.
about your journey in Vietnam, about how you decide to why you decide to have a trip and have a journey in this country. So now we can directly go to your experience working in the
Mhm.
tech and the IT field. In your
Sure.
in your opinions right now, what happened with this industry in the world? And do you think that the Vietnamese market right now is in a good condition? Because as you see on the LinkedIn and on the internet right now, there's a lot of the layoff situation
Mm,
with the not only with the big companies but also with the company in the small side or the average side.
yeah. So I think you're right. I think that's a reflection of the global economy as well. So
Mhm.
obviously, different countries, different regions, their economies are at slightly different points, and but generally speaking, you know, globally things aren't
Mm.
in the best position at the minute.
Mm.
Um, and I think Vietnam is no different. It's the same in the UK. It's the same in Europe. It's a little bit of a difficult time for the job market. But what I would say is, you know, what has impressed me about Vietnam is the strength of the country within
Mm.
IT and tech. You know, there's a lot of good universities that produce a lot of good talent, which is why there's so many fantastic developers.
Mm.
Um, but I think also because Vietnam has a very young population as well. So I think
Mm.
100 million, I think two-thirds of the country are under 30 or something very ridiculous like that. So I think naturally what you have in an economy like that, in that situation, is people are very tech savvy, so they're very
Mm.
comfortable with technology.
Mm.
And what that generally means is they are more welcoming of new technologies and wanting to learn about new tech. So,
Mm.
whether it's blockchain, Web3, or AI, you often have developing economies leading the way globally when it comes to innovation and stuff like that. So, I think it's a great time for graduates to, you know, to start working in the IT technical
Mm.
spaces. Naturally, there are macro factors in the world that we can't control, and it might
Mm.
make it a little bit more difficult. But stick it out.
Mm.
Certainly, for anyone that's new on the job market or new graduating and they're getting frustrated, the things that I would say is just hold on there and keep bettering yourself. So keep
Mm.
learning and
Mm.
learn new technologies. Research what the if you're a developer, the latest blockchain technologies are, or AI technologies. Get familiar
Mm.
with those because they're not going away, and they're only going to become more and more important. And not only will that help you within the Vietnamese market in the future,
Mm.
but as interconnectivity improves, you can work from anywhere. And in Europe, certainly more and more companies are going 100% remote, which then allows them to access talent anywhere. You don't have to be based in London, for example.
Mm.
Um, so it's only going to increase your potential job opportunities as the years tick on. So stay at the forefront of your area,
Mm.
um, and and you'll be in the best place. I think like that. And the other thing I love about Vietnam is it's so entrepreneurial as well. There's this great entrepreneurial spirit where every man and his dog seems to be running a coffee shop, setting up their own Web3 business on the side, and doing lots of different things. And that's fantastic because again, in Europe where living costs are much higher, that's not really possible.
Mm.
You're not that's oh, I'm just going to start a business is much more difficult because the costs of starting a business are much higher.
Mm.
So you don't always have to look down the route of, right, do I have to work for a big company? Here it's more easy and accessible to say, hey, why don't I look at starting my own
Mm.
business, whatever your area might be within.
Mm.
uh, yeah,
Yeah, okay. So I think this is the advice from you for the people who's looking for a job in this business field, right? Because this is a very
yeah.
difficult time, not only in Vietnam, but also for the global. So
Mm.
what do you think about the IT startup company, like of the maybe small companies or the average company in this field now in Vietnam? Do you have any advice for them? Because I have some experience. For example, last year I working for the like a very entrepreneur and a very small startup about the Web3 and the blockchains. But after
Mm.
like 4 or 5 months, they closed the company because of the financial problem. So
Yeah.
especially in this case, especially at this time, do you have any advice or any recommendations for the company with a site like this, especially for in the situation of the world economic crisis right now to survive? Do you have any ideas? Like,
uh,
yeah.
I mean, I suppose there's a few things. So
Mm.
I guess in a in a situation where a company is
Mm. We
a
can,
startup and
yeah.
it's a difficult time, I would say,
Mm.
you know, making sure that you streamline the business and you always
Mm.
look for efficiencies, a way of doing things better. You know, now looking at, you know, AI and
Mm.
seeing how can we
Mm.
implement AI within our business to keep
Mm.
costs down. You know,
Mm.
so always looking to um you know, ways of streamlining the business, ways of
Mm.
improving efficiencies and keeping costs low.
Mm.
Aside from that, you know, I guess this is important in a time like now, but important in any time is making sure you take really good care over the people that you hire.
Mm.
So for me, hiring people on attitude is always, you know, the number one priority. You can
Mm.
teach somebody a technical skill. I'd
Mm.
rather take someone who's less technically able, but with a better attitude than somebody who's more technically able and with a lesser attitude.
Mm.
Because you can bring that person up with their good attitude, where the other way you can't. And I think that's just highlighted when it's a difficult situation within the economy, you know, and morale might be a little bit lower. You want really good people who buy into your business.
Mm.
Uh, so I guess, yeah, those would be two things. And the other thing is, you know, get really good at creating content as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
in
Makes
this
sense. Yeah.
in this day and age, things like this, things like podcasts, things like,
Mm.
you know, video content, but you know, across the board, from the founder, you know, it's not just
Mm.
the marketing team anymore, you
Mm.
know, from the founders to the, you know, across the board, you know, again, you can have two companies exactly the same and they can be
Mm.
brilliant at what they do, but if the world doesn't know about this one and it does know about this one, they
You
will
have no
succeed.
clients, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly,
Mm.
yeah. And you know, again, this day and age with social media platforms, podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, it's so easy. You don't have to have a big budget to be able to
Mm.
go and get your name out there. And again, this is a relatively cheap way of doing what previously would take a hefty
Mm.
marketing budget to be able to go and create that name for yourself.
Mm, mm. Thank you so much for your experience. Yeah. Okay. So one of the advantages is having working experience not only in Vietnam but also, as you mentioned, your working background. You work in England before too. So the first question is, I know that's the how's the how Vietnam's main market and how England markets are different. So what is the difference between them? And in your opinion, what are the advantages, the things that you like about the IT industry in Vietnam? And for
Mm.
example, the quality of the human resource that you already mentioned, working style, office style, or even, can you share me some like very comparisons from your point of
Yeah,
view
yeah.
about the working style or about the Vietnamese and the England market right now? Yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose
Mm.
you know, I guess suppose the biggest differences for me would be the certainly within the IT and tech space in
Mm.
Vietnam, the average age is really, really young, which
Mm.
is a great thing because you have this sort of this energy and this enthusiasm, you
Mm.
know, both for building products, but also kind of getting out there and networking and learning more. Like this, I was blown away when I moved to Saigon this time,
Okay.
you know, to see how many like cool, you know, because we were working within the blockchain Web3 space, and you know, every
Mm.
other day there was a Web3 meetup or a hackathon or a,
Yeah.
you know, an Ethereum run event or a, you know, ICP event, and they would get, you know, hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of, you know, devs and, you know, entrepreneurs and founders. They're just kind of building, hacking,
Mm.
learning, and that I found is very, very different. The sort of you know, those types of events are fewer and further between in the UK. There's not that same enthusiasm,
Mm.
and I think that's a combination of how young and energetic the Vietnamese work, you know, IT workforce is, which is great,
Mm.
and also just the cost and accessibility within cities like Saigon and Da Nang and Hanoi. It's much easier to run an event. It's much easier to, you know, for example, if I want to have 5 meetings in a day face to face in Saigon and go to an event in the evening, it's easy to do. If I wanted to do that in London, it
Mm.
probably cost me about $500 of the entry fees and taxis and
Yeah.
trains, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to fit. London is so big and difficult to get across. Maybe two
Mm.
meetings
Mm.
and one event. It's not the same, and because it is so massive as well,
Mm.
the types of people that you get at these events are often much more promotional. They're less
Mm.
the people they're learning and talking about the tech. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I would say it's just much sort of younger, more energetic, enthusiastic um, tech community in
Mm.
Vietnam is what I found.
Mm.
And it's enjoyable. It's like infectious, the energy. As I said, for the web, there's an absolutely buzzing Web3 community, for example, in
Mm.
Saigon, and that really surprised me. So it's great for events. It's great for learning new things. It's great for people who have an idea and they want to start building a new product. That
Mm.
environment to just say, hey, I'm just going to go and do this. I'm going to start building. You don't really get that in London, from my experience, not to the same level anyway.
Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so now we can go directly more about what you are doing daily right now as a business
Cool.
development director. So it's a very cool ideas today because I'm a guy who's working in more in the production side. So maybe
Mhm.
my vision and how I start the day could be a bit different for the people who working in the like a business development side.
Mm.
So as a business development director, what do you usually do for a working day? How you start a new day, and how do
Mm.
you have efficient days in work at work?
Cool. So, so what I'm doing now. So
Mm.
whilst I'm still doing some consultancy for Sense, I've
Mm.
also got my own sort of freelance sales and sort of personal brand consultancy as well. So what I'm doing now is a little bit of kind of everything.
Mm.
There's a few things going on. When I was kind of full time managing head of business development and marketing at Sense,
Mm.
I had a team, I had a sales team and a marketing team. I was office based most of the time. Um, generally, we would check in at the start of the day with the sales and marketing team and talk about kind of what our strategy was for that day. We were looking
Mm.
at the key accounts that we were meeting,